Hi everyone, it's John. It's August 20th, and more importantly, it is Tuesday, meaning I have another book review to share with you guys. And today I'm especially excited because I think for almost everyone watching, the writer that I'll be talking about today will be new for you. It was certainly new for me up until maybe 6 or 8 years ago when I just happened to hear about her off chance in the article that I'll tell you about in the body of this review. The author is long gone, but her name was Dawn Powell, and this was one of her mini novels. This one, the title is a bit tough to see. It's called The Locusts Have No King. It is an allusion to a verse from Proverbs, and I'll read it's an epitaph of the novel. It reads, "The locusts have no king, yet they go forth, all of them by bands." Dawn Powell was born in 1896 and died in 1956, and worked as a novelist, and all of her work is pretty much was, for most of her life, completely unknown, and for about 20 or 30 years until after she died was also unknown, both in the United States and abroad. And the reason for this is because she really pointed her pen, which happened to be a pretty poisoned pen. She was a really sharp satirist, and she would take as her subjects of satire really high, important social sort of high flyers, famous people. For example, she published a book in 1942 called A Time to Be Born, and which she basically, if anyone, Americans probably know who Claire Booth Luce is. She was the wife of Henry Luce, who was the publisher of, I think, Time magazine back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. She herself was a congresswoman, which was extremely rare for the time that to be in Congress as a woman when she was there as a woman. An extraordinarily influential person who had a lot of literary friends, and she basically just lambasted her in this novel. And when you do things like that, you might as well write your own literary obituary. Her memory was slightly revitalized in the late 1980s when Gore Vidal published an essay in the New York Review of Books, noting that it was sad that she had been so forgotten and that her work had been forgotten. Her literary output can be divided pretty much into two distinct classes. One is dedicated to the novels of her own native rural Ohio. She was born in Gilead, Ohio. Especially how much she wanted to hightail it the hell out of there. And the second is a series of these deliriously scabrous, witty, funny novels, of which The Locusts Have No King is one, aimed at the bohemian literary set in Greenwich Village in the immediate aftermath of World War II, to which she would eventually move. I don't know if she moved to Greenwich Village itself, but she did move to New York City, and she would never leave, and she died there, like I said, in 1956. Like I said, The Locusts Have No King belongs distinctly to her latter set of novels, the ones that are about the New York literary set. And Powell's preoccupation is her distinct distaste for the major characters involved, with a large slice of their sort of meretricious, filthy private lives thrown in for good measure. One of the characters, whose name is Frederick Oliver, is an academic writer who seems to be a specialist in something vaguely related to medieval history, and sort of consequently ekes out a subsistence living writing scholarly monographs, refusing to help his publisher by by writing and contributing for other publications that might be of a wider interest to a broader reading public. Frederick is having an ongoing affair with a woman by the name of Lyle Gaynor, who is a successful playwright and who is herself already married to a man, though her husband is confined to a wheelchair, which has her left with, shall we say, a few itches unscratched. All of the Locusts seem to be buzzing along nicely until a very young woman by the name of Dodo shows up. Dodo is sort of a shameless boor and unrepentant minx, but she'll do anything to take one more step, climb one more rung of the social ladder by befriending more literary people or important people as she sees them. Really will do anything to further herself, of course. It's all about her and her own well-being and reputation. But when she increasingly tries to insert herself in Frederick's private life, she only finds that she is being used as a pawn in the attempts of others to further their own ambitions, just like she was using other people herself. There are some aspects of The Locusts Have No King that really run counter to it being read as a satire. One of which is that there is hardly a likable person in the entire thing. Pretty much everyone you read about in the novel is contemptible. But somehow that manages to not be a problem, and it still manages to be hilarious. What makes you laugh is Powell's cool, objective contempt for her characters, not so much the characters themselves. Frederick comes off as an aloof, condescending pedant, and Lyle as his unlikely, bubbly confidant. Another thing that makes it sort of weird as a satire is the rather niche areas of the publishing industry that Powell is trying to portray, which are now either anachronisms or perhaps won't register with the reader unfamiliar with how the publishing world really functions. Somehow, however, it all manages to really dovetail together in a seamless way that actually bears few signs of the novel's age. I think this, let me double check, was published in, if I'm not mistaken, 1948. So, 71 years old, and doesn't really read like it. Does not read like a dated novel. So, like I said, seamless, bears few signs of its age, and really is searching in its satire, not leaving any motivation unturned or romantic decision of its characters unquestioned. The setting of the novel, which is very much, if anyone is familiar with those old films from the mostly 30s and 40s of characters like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall, the setting is very much reminiscent of Bogart or Bacall sort of decamping from a cab and into the comforts of an anonymous dive bar on a rainy, dark night. An image which is particularly evoked in Chapter 1, by the way. And this imagery sort of makes the reading experience a weird, alluring hybrid of both noir and literary satire. But somehow, despite, like I said, the dated imagery that noir films are soaked in, the only thing that really gives Powell's characters away as products of the 1940s is the rare neologism or malapropism that has disappeared from common usage. You know, there's that sort of interesting way that we can always tell dialogue from the 40s and 50s. It's sort of arch, and it sounds fake to us now. If you go and listen to a simply because of the way acting was taught and the way that certain phrases were used that we just don't use anymore. Like old boy. I mean, no one calls anyone else old boy anymore, but that might be a sign that, unless you're using it sarcastically, that a movie was made in another time. But archetypes are archetypes for a reason, right? They are pretty much timeless, and they're just as funny when lampooned today as they were when they were 71 years ago. What little Don Powell is still in print seems to be there by the good graces of a house by the name of Steerforth Press. And you can see, if you turn the novel sideways, here is the novel, or here's the name of Steerforth, and is it, yeah, so also right here. So just in case you're looking for these they're nicely done things, this is the way they look. Gray, white, novel title and author name here. Sort of nondescript looking, but still manages to be quite attractive. So Steerforth Press is putting these out. I know that some of her work that's been published by other publishers is still floating around in the world, but Steerforth is a press that's only about 25 years old and has reprinted probably 8 or 10 or 12 of Powell's novels. So they really seem to be doing a yeoman's work when it comes to getting her name out there again. And I know that there are dozens of such small houses engaged in passion projects like that, but it's nice to be able to see one and call out their name and recognize them verbally, especially when they've gone really out of their way to reintroduce writers to a superb American writer who should have never needed to be reintroduced to us in the first place. I'm glad, and I think so many other readers will be too, that Steerforth has decided that she deserves a place among their publications. So let me know if you've heard of Don Powell, or maybe if Gore Vidal introduced you to her. I think that article came out in 1987 or 88 or something. And it's a wonderful article if you happen to have access to the, I think it was NYRB archives. Go look up that article and read it. It's a wonderful little excavation of someone I think we should all get our hands on. I don't know really how much I would think of the Ohio novels. They don't really seem to be that satirical in voice or form. But the New York ones, he really praises to just high heaven. So I've already ordered 2 more. So when I read those, which may not necessarily be soon, I will definitely let you know what I think about them here. This is Don Powell's 1948 novel, The Locusts Have No King. I will see you next week, guys. Bye.